Verstappen just dropped a bombshell on Red Bull. Well, hold on tight because we've got some breaking news that's sending shockwaves through the F1 community. The FIA has been making last-minute rule changes, leaving teams and drivers scrambling to adapt to the new regulations. And it's not just Red Bull's Max Verstappen who's feeling the heat. Teams across the board, including Mercedes and Ferrari, have been impacted in different ways, and tensions are running high. In this video, we'll take a closer look at how the FIA's rule changes have impacted the championship so far and what we can expect going forward. From team adaptations to driver controversies and fan reactions, we'll cover it all. So buckle up and get ready for an adrenaline-fueled ride through the twists and turns of this F1 season. Hey there, fellow F1 fans, welcome back to F1 Racing. So, are you ready for a wild ride this season? So, let's first dive into some background of the rules FIA changed for this 2023 season. So listen up, folks, because we've got some serious changes made to F1 in 2023. Here's the list. First up, we've got some technical changes that are sure to make a big impact. The FIA has raised the minimum ride height of the cars by 15 millimeters to help eradicate porpoising, which dominated the headlines last season. They've also strengthened the roll hops, following Zhou Guanyu's horrific crash at Silverstone. Plus, there will be new sensors installed to measure the car's vertical forces accurately. Next, let's talk about grid penalties. By providing greater clarity regarding the regulations governing back of the grid penalties, the FIA has made the situation significantly less confusing. Drivers who have accumulated more than 15 grid position penalties over the course of the race, or who have been penalized to start at the rear of the grid, will be required to start behind every other driver who has been classified. Now let's talk about tires. F1 will be experimenting with tires in qualifying, and for two events, all drivers will be required to use just hard tires in Q1, mediums in Q2, and softs in Q3. Pirelli boss Mario Isola believes it's more sustainable for the tire manufacturer, and it'll make for an exciting race. Moving on, the width of the reflective surface on the rearview mirrors will be increased by 50 millimeters as part of the new rule changes being implemented by Formula One to enhance visibility. In addition to this, the number of working hours required of Formula One team employees during Grand Prix race weekends will be cut back over the course of the next 2 seasons. Number 5, guys, is all about working hours, as we just gave a hint in the previous rule. You know, F1 races are not just about the drivers, it's about the whole team that works behind the scenes to make it all happen. And those guys work long hours, like really long hours. So, to make it a bit easier on them, the FIA has decided to reduce the number of hours worked by F1 team personnel across Grand Prix race weekends over the next 2 seasons. They've decided to start by starting the third of 3 restricted periods on Fridays, an hour earlier in 2023, and then another hour will be taken off for 2024. And that's not all, guys. The number of curfews allowed for the first Wednesday and second Thursday will also be cut in half, so the team can have a bit more rest time. It's all about promoting better working conditions and improving the overall well-being of the team. In wet weather conditions, there will be new specifications of wet tires starting with Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix and moving forward. In addition, there will be the introduction of a new wet weather package project, which has the support of the teams and is intended to enhance visibility in wet weather conditions. Lastly, teams are being given extra freedom regarding the cooling of fuel. Fuel in a car must not be colder than the lowest of either 10 degrees centigrade below ambient temperature or 10 degrees centigrade. This being cut from 20 degrees at any time when the car is running after leaving the competitor's designated garage area. Now, as we have discussed the changes made by FIA prior to the start of the season in March, some changes were introduced at the last minute by them, which impacted the drivers, teams, and fans as well. But what are those changes and how did they make an impact? Let's find out. The FIA has widened the grid boxes. You heard it right, folks. After the confusion and chaos of the Saudi Arabian and Bahrain GPs, the FIA has decided to take action. They've made the grid boxes 20 centimeters wider than they were in the 2022 season, making them 2.7 meters in total. This change was implemented at the Australian Grand Prix, and let us tell you, it was a sight to behold. Now, we all know that the start of the race is one of the most exciting moments in F1, and with the wider grid boxes, we're sure to see even more action and drama as the drivers fight for position. The FIA is always looking for ways to make the sport safer and more exciting, and this change is just one example of that, but sometimes the rules are made just too quickly without considering the impact. And one such rule was about the penalties where 2 F1 players were penalized, and later the decision was revoked. So, let us tell you about the dramatic events that unfolded during the first 2 races of the 2023 Formula One season related to FIA rules. Former teammates and fierce competitors Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon found themselves in hot water with the FIA, sparking a lively debate among fans online about the rules and regulations. During the Bahrain Grand Prix, Ocon received a 5-second penalty for starting in the wrong position on the grid. He dutifully served his time, but then went on to break the speed limit in the pit lane by just 0.062 seconds. This led to an additional 10-second penalty that he also served. Meanwhile, at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Alonso found himself in the same predicament as Ocon, earning a 5-second penalty for the same infraction. Despite serving his penalty and crossing the finish line in third place, Alonso's dreams of a podium were shattered when the FIA noticed that the rear jack was touching his car during the penalty. As a consequence of this, they hit him with a severe 10-second time penalty, which dropped him to 4th position and allowed George Russell of Mercedes to take the third step of the podium. But just when we assumed everything was over, the FIA changed their minds, putting Alonso back into the top 3 at Aston Martin. What a roller coaster ride for the drivers. One such incident related to FIA penalties occurred at the Australian Grand Prix last week. Carlos Sainz, the Ferrari driver, expressed his frustration with the FIA following the Australian Grand Prix, where he was given a 5-second penalty for a crash with his compatriot, Fernando Alonso. Sainz described it as the most unfair penalty he had ever seen. The crash, which took place on the penultimate lap, caused a series of collisions and led to the third red flag of the race. Stewards concluded that Sainz was wholly to blame for the conclusion and handed him the penalty, which dropped him to the back of the 12 finishers. Ferrari was left without any points after Charles Leclerc's first lap retirement. The penalty caused controversy as the final lap was completed behind a safety car, which meant Sainz had no chance to create a gap from his competitors. As he waited in the pit lane for the rolling restart, Sainz expressed his dissatisfaction with the penalty to his team over the radio. Another such last-minute change, or you may say enforcement, was made by the FIA. It's about the traditional celebration that we've all grown accustomed to, the one where team members climb the pit wall fence to celebrate their driver's victory. Now, FIA's Formula One race director, Niels Wittich, has reminded all teams that this practice is strictly prohibited under the International Sporting Code. Yep, you heard it right. Climbing the catch fencing along the pit lane to celebrate is not allowed, and it has been banned since the 2006 season. The safety order states that team members may enter pit lane only before or after they are needed to work on a car, and that they must leave as soon as the work is finished. So what does this mean? Well, according to Appendix H, Article 2.3.2 of the FIA ISC, it is forbidden for personnel to climb on pit wall debris fences at any time. Any action by a team breaching this ban will be reported to the stewards. Despite this rule, team members from Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes have been seen climbing the fence during celebrations when their teams won in 2022 and even as recently as Jeddah in 2023. Surprisingly, none of these incidents have resulted in any investigations by the stewards. But in his latest event notes for the Australian Grand Prix, Wittich has once again reminded teams that climbing the pit wall is still prohibited. This is just one of the FIA's many efforts to reinforce the application of existing rules. Let's see the reaction to this rule. Christian Horner, who is responsible for Red Bull's racing operations, is unhappy that the FIA is more strictly enforcing a regulation that prohibits F1 team employees from climbing the pit wall during victory celebrations. Before the start of the Australian Grand Prix, the principal of Red Bull expressed his dissatisfaction and referred to the celebrations as iconic. After Max Verstappen set the record for the quickest lap time in the first practice session, Horner was taken aback by the decision to tighten things up. Although he acknowledged the significance of safety, he is of the opinion that the pit wall celebrations have always been a part of Grand Prix racing and that they should be permitted so long as they carried out in a safe way. It's always been a part of Grand Prix racing, he said. The recent stricter interpretation of the rule that bans Formula One team employees from climbing the pit wall for victory celebrations has caused quite a stir among fans. They took to social media to express their outrage at the new ruling that could lead to penalties for teams continuing to celebrate in that way. One Twitter user sarcastically commented on the situation saying, "FIA next week. No spraying of champagne. 1. Slip hazard. 2. It proper stings people's eyes." Meanwhile, another fan pointed out that walking through the pits during last year's Australian Grand Prix posed a much bigger safety risk. They also argued that these celebrations have never caused any issues before and that the FIA is taking the excitement out of the sport. The fans' anger was tangible, and they had a lot more reactions to share about the FIA's decision. Another recent last-minute expected change in FIA rules is to scrap the number of practice sessions. Was it true, or did Stefano not mean to say that? There have been many rumors circulating that the number of practice sessions will be scrapped, but the president of Formula One, Stefano Domenicali, says not so fast. While Domenicali expressed his support for the cancellation of free practice sessions in an interview with Portuguese TV, he later clarified his comments, stating that his words had been blown out of proportion. Domenicali stressed the importance of balance in giving teams and drivers the chance to showcase their abilities, while also providing rookies with the necessary practice time. He acknowledged the need for changes to engage a growing audience, but emphasized the sport's respect for traditions. Fans can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that practice sessions are here to stay, but keep an eye out for any potential changes in the future. He said about the rule at the Australian Grand Prix after the session, where Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton battled it out in a rain-affected second practice, with Fernando Alonso ultimately taking the lead. Max Verstappen, the Formula One star, has sounded an alarm with his latest comments. The Dutchman has stated that he may walk away from the sport if the organizers continue to alter the weekend format by getting rid of free practice sessions in the near future. The outspoken driver voiced his opinion to Sport TV, saying, "I'm happy with just the main race. I think that's way better for the excitement. I, naturally, of course hope that there won't be too many changes. Otherwise, I won't be around for too long." These comments from the Red Bull driver have caused a stir in the F1 community, with fans and experts alike wondering whether Verstappen will indeed leave the sport if changes are made. So, we conclude today's video with the stance of Max Verstappen we just talked about, and that's all for today's video on the FIA's last-minute rule changes in the 2023 F1 season. We hope you found it informative and insightful. It's clear that the FIA's changes have caused some controversy and frustration among teams and drivers, but it's also clear that they are doing their best to adapt and stay competitive. As the season progresses, we'll be keeping a close eye on how the rules continue to impact the championship, and we'll be sure to keep you updated. But before we go, we'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the FIA's rule changes? Do you think they're fair, or do you think they're causing more harm than good? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more F1 content, including news, analysis, and interviews with some of the biggest names in the sport. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the track.